The Home Secretary set to hail a drop in the number of small boat crossings in August as evidence Labour's efforts to smash the gangs are working.
But the 29,000 total arrivals for the year so far is still tracking to be a record. So what would the Conservatives do? The Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, joins us now. Chris Philp, very good morning to you. We saw some pretty unpleasant scenes at the weekend, more protests and indeed a child being caught up in what happened. You can't see the child in this picture because we've blurred the image out to keep their identity private, but somebody is pouring liquid on a napkin in order to try and clear the pepper spray from their eyes. Do you support these protests?
Good morning. Well, first of all, any protest which is violent or which breaks the law, I most certainly do not support at all. Violent protest is never justified in any context. But of course, the right to peaceful, lawful protest is something we've enjoyed in this country for centuries. And I do understand why people are angry about the government's failure to control our borders. But just to repeat the point, violent protest or unlawful protest is not acceptable. But I understand why people are angry.
And they're particularly angry, it seems, at the moment about using hotels to house asylum seekers. However, when you were an immigration minister, there had previously been a requirement for local authorities to consult on whether it would be appropriate to have asylum seekers in their area. But you changed the rules, allowing councils to use hotels as accommodation for asylum seekers without any consultation process at all.
Well, if you look at the last government's record, in the last 9 months of the last government's time in office, 200 hotels were closed. And if that rate of closure had continued after the election, by now, there would be no hotels in use at all. But unfortunately, since the election, we've seen record ever numbers of illegal immigrants crossing the Channel. This year so far has been the worst in history. The government's claim to be smashing the gangs is frankly laughable. And that is why, since the election, instead of continuing to reduce, the number of illegal immigrants in asylum hotels has in fact gone up. It's gone up by 8%.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary to focus on 9 months when you were in government for 14 years and we had record levels of immigration on your watch. In the year that you told councils that they no longer had to consult on hotel accommodation, the number of hotels increased. And in fact, so if we look at the end of March 2020, which is when you told councils they no longer needed to consult, there were around 1,200 people accommodated in hotels. That number increased to around 4,400 by that June, 8,000 towards the end of August, and approximately 9,500 in October. So literally in 1 year, you had this massive rise in asylum seekers in hotels. And now you're blaming the government for not dealing with it.
Well, of course, the period you're quoting, starting in March 2020, is, of course, during COVID, when international travel and the ability to return people was obviously hugely impaired by the COVID pandemic. As I said earlier, the Conservatives in government closed 200 hotels in their last 9 months, and had that trend continued after the election, by now there would be no hotels at all.
OK,
but look,
so
really,
if we take a year that wasn't in COVID, the number of asylum seekers accommodated in hotels continued to remain high and peaked in June 2023. I mean, my point is, you can blame this government all you like for not handling this issue, but the issue became out of control under the Conservative government.
Well, I've already said that the numbers came down by 200. In 2023, by the way, the full year, the number crossing the Channel illegally actually went down by about 30%. And we had a plan to stop it completely, which is to remove everybody who crossed the Channel illegally, either to their country of origin or to a safe third country. Could be Rwanda, could be somewhere else. But the new Labour government, Keir Starmer, cancelled that just before it was due to start, with no replacement. And as a consequence, the numbers have surged since the election. This year, the numbers are 40% higher than last year, and this year is going to be the worst ever because the Labour government cancelled that deterrent before it started, with no replacement. We've had a string of gimmicks. We're going to smash the gangs, they said. Then they said, oh, the French are going to intervene in the sea near the shores. Well, that hasn't happened. Then they said they're going to send 50 people a week back to France, which obviously will make no difference because that's only 6% of those crossing. 94% would get to stay. That hasn't started either. Now they're saying they're going to tweak the family rules. It is gimmick after gimmick after gimmick.
Okay.
It's not working. This is the worst year ever. And the government just doesn't accept this is a full-blown crisis.
Yeah.
Which requires a crisis response.
OK, and the language is quite inflammatory. And I would say that people looking at the crisis know that it began on your watch. I mean, originally, David Cameron had said that he wanted to keep immigration to the tens of thousands. It got close to 1 million under the Conservatives. And so, as a result, I think a lot of people are thinking, well, you caused the crisis. This government doesn't seem to be able to handle the crisis, and therefore they're turning their attention to a party, Reform, which says it will do mass deportations and take us out of the European Convention on Human Rights. Are you in danger of being hijacked on this issue by Reform, and do you support their measures on how to tackle it?
Well, what they announced a week or so ago actually largely copied and pasted the Conservatives' deportation bill that we tabled in Parliament 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 weeks ago, maybe even 8 weeks ago now, which would have ensured every single person, not just some of them, but every single person crossing the Channel illegally would have been immediately removed to their country of origin, if possible, or a safe third country if not. So Reform sort of copied that plan. When it comes to things like the ECHR, we are not going to shoot from the hip. We're going through a thoughtful process with an eminent KC, Lord Wolfson, one of the country's leading barristers. We're going to announce our position very imminently. But unlike Reform, who sort of shoot from the hip without thinking about it, when we announce a policy, it will have been properly thought through, carefully calibrated, and we're going to be confident that it actually works in practice. And that is the difference between us and Reform. We're doing the thinking, making sure our policies are credible, properly thought out and are going to work, whereas for Reform have good slogans. I will give them that. They've got very good slogans and a charismatic leader, but they don't generally think it through properly. They just shoot from the hip. And to the extent there was any substance in their announcement a week or so ago, they had copied and pasted it from our deportation bill, which we tabled a couple of months back.
Just one question on the economy, Mr Philp, because as well as being Immigration Minister, you were also Chief Secretary to the Treasury. There have been worries about the bond market being unstable this August. People saying, could there be a repeat of the Liz Truss bond market turmoil? And you were the Chief Secretary in the Liz Truss government during that crisis. What advice would you give Rachel Reeves as to how to handle a bond market crisis when it looks like it's coming your way?
Good morning, Ed. Well, I think, first of all, the yields on 30-year bonds are actually higher now, and they have been higher for a number of months, than they were even during that mini-budget episode, which lasted a few weeks. For 6 or 7 months now, those bond yields are actually higher than they were during the Liz Truss period, which people don't seem to comment on very much. The point I was making internally at the time, which unfortunately was not listened to, is that you basically need to get spending under control. You need to get spending down, particularly welfare spending. And I did make that point internally back in September 2022, but it wasn't heeded. So the only way to really fix this, in my view, is to control spending, particularly welfare spending, because I think further tax rises, which is what the Chancellor appears to be contemplating, will not only break her election promises and the promise she made after the budget to the CBI when she said last autumn there'd be no more tax rises, it will cripple the economy because businesses will end up getting shut down.
People say the budget gap is about 20, 30, 40 billion pounds a year. You would say spending cuts of that magnitude are the only way to stop another crisis?
Well, I think spending restraint and spending control, we would have, I think, had we been in government in the last year, we would have made different choices around. We had a plan to, the last election, we had a plan to reduce welfare spending by 12 billion, all these enormous public sector pay rises, often inflation-busting pay rises with no performance improvement in return is not something we would have done. And, of course, Ed Miliband, your old buddy Ed Miliband, has been spending vast amounts of money on his various green projects, which we wouldn't have done either. So I think the answer has to lie in spending, including welfare, particularly welfare spending, because we just can't afford to spend 150 billion pounds a year paying working-age people not to work. I mean, it's obviously denying the labour market workforce because people are using benefits instead, and it's causing crippling levels of taxation, which means businesses are relocating, successful people are leaving the country and going to places like Dubai or Milan or goodness knows where else. And when the tax level and jobs are being lost, I mean, unemployment has gone up every single month under this government because taxes have been increased.
Thank you, Chris Philp, and we'll see if they listen to you at this time at the Treasury.
I doubt it.
Appreciate you coming on with us. Thank you.